Yeah.
Yeah, but Katie, I'm sorry, Katie.
Yeah, well, it's also.
No, I have
Three of us, 3 hours. Oh, there you go. 3 of us did 3 hours. That's not very good. That's not very good. Well, we worked in a row, we were doing wildlife and stuff. So.
It's a dog.
Covered.
It goes like 5 feet tall, 6, 7 feet wide. There are 2 meetings.
Okay, it's 5:30, so I'll go ahead and call this organizational meeting to order. This is kind of a unique meeting. It's the one meeting a year where the superintendent calls a meeting to order prior to the election of board officers. To start with, I'd like to welcome our 3 new school board members, Dominique Stewart, Rachel Henderson, and Dave Smith. All 3 of them have taken the oath of office and have been duly elected to serve on the school board of the school district of the Menomonie area. So let's welcome all 3. Jenny, could you please take the roll?
Rachel Henderson. Mark Hillman.
Here.
Tanya Huseby. Here. Carl Palmer.
Here.
Amy Riddle Swanson.
Here.
Charlie Schneider.
Here.
Angie Skillings. Here. Dave Smith.
Here.
Dominique Stewart. Here.
Okay, terrific. So the next item on the agenda is to elect the board officers. And according to our school district policy, it's really at the board's discretion how you would like to proceed with electing the officers. We will start with board president. This is the one time a year where the board can use blind votes or ballots, not making a public vote or a nomination. So at this point, I'll open up the floor for nominations. Are there any nominations for president of the school board?
Charlie Schneider.
Okay, so we have a nomination for Charlie.
Dominic Stewart.
We have a nomination for Dominique Stewart. Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations?
And I'll be vice.
Last call, any other nominations?
Right here. Carl Palmer.
Decline.
Okay, Carl, you decline the nomination? So we'll make one more last call. Are there any other nominations? Would you like to take voice vote or ballot vote? Anybody like to make a motion on how you'd like to vote?
I make a motion to do by ballot.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, Jenny, could you please hand out ballots? The 2 nominees are Charlie Schneider and Dominique Stewart. So please just write one of their names on your ballot. And then Jenny, you can fold your ballot in half and Jenny will come and collect the ballots and tabulate them. On a vote of 5-4, Charlie Schneider has been elected president of the board. So at this point, actually, maybe Charlie and Mark, you can switch seats if you'd like to. It's not too far to go, Mark.
Okay, so now we will entertain nominations for vice president. Are there any nominations for vice president?
I would like to nominate Carl Palmer.
Okay, there's Carl Palmer. Any other nominations for vice president? Any other nominations for vice president? Last call. Any other nominations for vice president? All right,
I make a motion to elect Carl Palmer by acclamation, is that what it's called?
Cast unanimous ballot. Close nominations and cast unanimous ballot.
Yeah, close the nominations and elect Carl by acclamation.
I second.
okay, everyone okay with a voice vote on that? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Opposed? Okay, Carl is the vice president.
I think it's way to do the seating after, like, next meeting. I think it'd be my suggestion.
Okay, now we'll entertain nominations for treasurer. Any nominations for treasurer?
Rachel Henderson?
Okay, we have a nomination for Rachel Henderson. Any other nominations for treasurer? Any other nominations for treasurer?
I'd like to nominate Tanya.
And Tanya? Okay. Any other nominations for treasurer? Any other nominations for treasurer? Last call. Any other nominations for treasurer? All right, so we have Rachel and Tanya. You want ballots again? Okay. Okay, the vote is 5-4 in favor of Rachel. So Rachel is our treasurer. And now board clerk. Any nominations for board clerk? Any nominations for board clerk?
I'll nominate Dave Smith.
Okay, we have a nomination for Abe Smith. Any other nominations for board clerk? Any other nominations for board clerk? Last call, any other nominations for board clerk? Right,
I move we have a unanimous vote for Abe for clerk. A second.
right, so motion passed. Oh, I'm sorry, apologize. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, now, Abe is our board clerk.
Charlie, just for the record keeping, let's make sure we have the motions recorded. So Carl made the motion and was Mark seconded? Did we get the motions written down for the unanimous ballot for vice president? Great. We're good.
Okay, next on the agenda is the board assignments, committee assignments, excuse me. And so first we have the health insurance committee rep. Would anybody, who did that last?
I did.
Carl did? Okay.
I'm happy to do it again if anyone else is interested.
Anybody else interested in doing that? Carl? Okay, next we have graduation delegates.
I would like to attend graduation. I
Okay,
have several that are graduating, you know.
last year was Amy, Dave, Clint, and Carl. Amy has expressed an interest. Anyone else?
I would.
I would.
Daughter.
No, sorry,
I would.
Angie?
And we can do as many as the board would like. Typically, we do 3 and have 1 alternate.
So we have Amy, Carl, Amy, Carl, and Angie at this point. You feel anyone want to be the alternate?
I would be the alternate.
Okay. Moving on to the TIF review board rep. I was our representative on that last year. If no one else has an interest, I would do it again, but if anyone else is interested, I could forego that. Anyone have an interest in that? Okay. That's 1 meeting a year. And we have the Csa Convention Delegate. That was Tanya last year.
Charlie, before anybody volunteers, we should point out we were notified that the Csa Convention is June 6th, which is the same evening of our school board retreat. And it's up in Turtle Lake. I believe we do need a representative to attend that, but we will clarify with Csa to be sure.
Thank you.
Whoever volunteers may have to miss the presentation from John Ashley unless they're able to reschedule that.
I would hate for anyone to miss out on John Ashley. I mean, the whole idea of retreat is to have the whole board together.
If we are required to send a delegate, we will for sure look to schedule that retreat.
Thank you.
Do we have to name a delegate tonight in absence of knowing that, or can we hold on?
One way or another, we will need a delegate. So I think we should probably just name a delegate tonight, and then if we have to cancel the retreat, we could always cancel.
More than happy to do it again if nobody wants to.
Anyone else have an interest in that? Okay. One way or another, you know what you're doing on June 6th. All right, a representative and an alternative, excuse me, for the WSB Convention Delegate, which is in January in Milwaukee. And last year it was Amy and Angie as the alternate. Anyone have an interest in that?
I would.
Anyone else have an interest in being the alternate for that?
I wouldn't mind being the alternate.
And for the new members, that wouldn't preclude you from attending the convention, right?
Absolutely not.
It doesn't mean that.
Anybody can go to the convention. The delegate is the only person that is allowed into the delegate assembly to vote on resolutions.
But I would highly recommend for all members to try to go to that. It's very informative. You'll learn a lot at that convention.
It's one of the best conventions I've ever been to, and I've been to a lot of conventions.
All right, down to the transportation contract rep. Last year that was Dave Steyer. That's working with Menomonie Transportation. Anybody have an interest in that? Mark? Okay. And the Quality Improvement Committee. Last year that was Carl and I. Anybody have an interest in that?
Joe, there was no meeting for that, so can you refresh us on what that entails?
Sure. Because of COVID, QIC groups were postponed. And what it is that quarterly, we have a group of teaching staff and a group of hourly staff that come in. Typically, the meetings are Thursdays, so it's 4 times a year. The hourly comes in at 2:30, and the teaching staff comes in at 4. So it's a commitment 4 times a year from about 2:30 until around 5:30.
I would still be interested in that. If there's another.
I'd be happy to do that as well.
So I have Carl and Abe for the Quality Improvement Committee. And lastly, we have the Diversity Committee. Last year, that was Chris and Amy. Any interest in that?
I would. I would like to also be a part of that committee.
And if nobody else objects, I'll also, unless somebody else wants it, I'm okay with not being.
We had 2 last year. I don't know a lot about that committee. Do we have room for 3 or want 3?
The board can assign as many as you want. Typically, 2 would be what we've operated with. It's whatever the board would like though.
How many other members are on that committee?
It fluctuates, but probably around a dozen.
What's the board pleasure there? Do we want to have 3 representatives or have Amy be an alternate?
3 seems fine with me. It's it's not an overwhelming number.
Hearing consensus, Amy would be a 3rd there then? Okay, next. Item 2C, appointing the deputy clerk. So typically, the board has appointed the administrative assistant as the deputy clerk. It is recommended that the board appoint Jenny Meixel as the deputy clerk. Would entertain a motion to do that.
I so move.
Second, Peterson.
Carl and Abe. Good. Okay, let's take a vote on that. Anyone, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
So then after the meeting, Dave, if you could swear in Jenny as your deputy clerk, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, item 2D, set the date and venue of the annual meeting. If we follow the same calendar format, it would be on August 22nd at 6 p.m. Typically, it's in the church, or prior to COVID, it was in the lecture hall at the high school. August 22nd at 6 p.m. Does anybody have an issue with that, or reason why we want to move that?
That would mean that the board would meet, or for a regular meeting at 5:30, or the committee of the whole at 5:30.
Usually we start that one at 5, Amy, to make sure we have enough time.
Let's, can I get a motion on that to have the meeting on August 22nd at 6 PM? I'm sorry, who was that? Tanya? And a second? Mark, second? All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. 2F. Start time for regular board meetings. Both our regular boarding meetings, and our special meetings have been starting at 5:30. I believe that's been going on for quite a few years. Anybody have a reason why we'd want to change that? Any thoughts there? Discussion?
I make a motion, we keep it at 5:30 for both meetings.
A second.
Second by Carl.
Would it be onerous to move it to 5:45? For most of the last year, I was in a camp where I had to run from work, home, drop off kids, get back, and was running the door just as the meeting was starting. I know if people have work schedules that end at, just at or before 5, it's hard to get here to participation. A few more minutes, not rushing traffic might be nice, but if there's a reason not to do that, that's fine as well. I'm curious what the board's view is. I also don't want to keep all our staff all night either, so.
Any other thoughts on that?
It works either way, works for me, but at the meeting on Thursday night, there was a suggestion or a recommendation or another school that has board members come in 30 minutes prior to the meeting, so that if the community wants to speak with them, they can, which I thought was kind of a good idea. And then maybe perhaps we could move the meeting to 6 and then have a board member here at 5:30. I don't know if that's something doable or.
I think that would be, I would personally be in favor of that. I think that'd be a great thing for us to discuss at that theoretically we do 6 meeting and decide as a board to do that. But I think that was a great idea. I forget which district said they do that, but
Yeah, I thought
that
it
was
was
great.
good. And so in that instance, it would make sense to start it at 6 o'clock.
If we decide at this point to hold it at 5:30 as the motion states, we can revisit that later and move it to 6 o'clock without issue, correct?
Yes.
So in other words, bring it back to the agenda and then go down at a different time?
Unless somebody wants to make a motion or a friendly motion now to change to 5:45, or we can vote and leave it as it is.
Sorry, but we're talking about moving it to 5:45 or moving the official start time to 6?
Right now, the motion is keeping it at 5:30. Abe suggested possibly moving it to 5:45, but only a discussion at this point. And then we talked about maybe at that June 6th meeting, we decide that we possibly want to implement what that other district was doing with the public at 5:30. And at that rate, then we would bring on the agenda maybe the last meeting in June or in July to change the official start of this meeting to 6 o'clock. And have that public comment period at 5:30. So at this point, the motion on the table is to keep the meeting at 5:30 as was originally, as we've been doing in the most recent past.
Would 5:45 be an inconvenience to others on the board? I mean, respecting his concern of getting here with kids, I mean, that's a long 3 years if you're doing that.
It works for me.
5:45 works for me.
I would make a motion then to change the start time to 5:45.
Are you good with that, friendly amendment? Okay.
Actually gives me a few more minutes to get here.
Okay, so then, Jenny, can you read back the motion, please?
The motion to adjust the meeting time to 5:45 PM.
Okay, so the motion on the table is to adjust the meeting time at this point to 5:45 PM for both the regular meeting and the special committee meeting.
Okay, and I made the original motion and I will continue that motion for the, adjustment.
Any other discussion? Okay. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
Second.
All right, we're adjourned. I heard Carl and yes, yes, we are adjourned. I thought I said that, did I not say that? No. I didn't say that, sorry. We are adjourned. All right. Yeah, let's.
How are the meetings? How the mics, some of them are on and some of them are off. Is there a,
So we're not talking, we shut them off. I forgot.
is blue or green on?
Blue.
Blue's on, okay.
All right. So we'll call this meeting to order. Excuse me, call this meeting to order. It is 5:57. So Jenny, would you do a roll call, please?
Amy Riddle Swanson.
Here.
Tanya Hughesby. Here. Charlie Schneider.
Here.
Mark Hillman.
Here.
Angie Skillings.
Here.
Carl Palmer.
Here.
Abe Smith.
Here.
Dominique Stewart. Here. Rachel Henderson.
Here.
Okay, so we have a quorum. Item 1C, agenda order approval and revision. Anybody have any suggestions on revisions to the agenda? Anything? I have one thing I'd like to, I guess, discuss, if I can, and we're gonna need to do agenda item. But we do, at the regular meeting, we do the Pledge of Allegiance, but we don't do the Pledge of Allegiance at a committee meeting, at this meeting. I guess I would suggest that we do that. I don't know what it takes to add that. I don't know if anybody has any discussion, but it makes sense to me to do that at both. Anybody have any objection to that?
Would that include reading the mission statement as well?
I think that it should.
Fine with me?
Okay, so, at the next, committee meeting, we'll do that. And, all right, recommendations and accommodations, we have none, okay? And community communications. Okay, we have two. Okay. All right. The comments of the people of the Menomonie School District of the Menomonie area are encouraged and appreciated by the board and administrators. Education is a partnership with the schools, parents, and taxpayers, all being important participants. Members of the public are welcome to provide comments to the board during the community communications items listed on the agenda. This is a time to air concerns and express your opinion on issues. There should be no negative personal attacks against any individuals, including staff, board members, or administrators. Please indicate if you would like the board to direct a member of the administration to respond to your concerns. I'm getting my stopwatch out. So we have two this evening. Josie Pillman is up first.
think I'm supposed to state my name and my address.
Yes.
I'm Joseph Hillman, and I live at 235 Third Avenue East in Knapp, Wisconsin, and that is part of the Menomonie School District. And for Dr. Zagowski and board members. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, welcome to all the new board members, and the community looks forward to your input into the SDMA. I'm particularly interested in the present gender policy plan. I'm hopeful that a committee can soon be formed to take a good look at this policy and tweak it as necessary to have the most wholesome policy we can. Oftentimes, these worldviews are being presented at much too young an age to our school population. I believe all teaching on this topic must be age appropriate and moral. Nature and your own conscience informs you of what is right. So we look forward to a good evaluation of the gender policy plan. And I noticed that you say that I should ask you to take notice. I'd really like to see this put on the agenda to form a committee or to somehow address this. So, thank you.
Thank you. Elena Marshall?
I'm Elena Marshall, 24403 3rd Street East, Menomonie. I had two kids who went all the way through the district and are now graduated and productive citizens in as far away as they get from each other.
Could you speak up just a little bit?
Sure.
You can hold this.
So I have two kids who went all the way through the Menomonie School District and are now graduated and out in the world. Welcome to the new board members, and hello again to the repeating board members, whatever you want to call it. You're not old, you're seasoned board members, there you go. So first of all, I want to say thank you to the board and the district for all it does to be as gender inclusive as we can in all of its policies. And second of all, I would like to say that I have served as Unity South's intercultural development ambassador. If there's anything that I can do to help the board navigate its differences, I'm really happy to do that. If there's anything I can do to help the diversity committee with its work, I'm really happy to do that too. So please, I've offered this before, and I'll offer it again.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the personnel consent agenda. About the items in specific. You want to take a motion for sure? Sure. Entertain a motion to approve the personnel consent agenda.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second. Okay, just first of all, I'd like to thank Samantha White and her team, also the principals who have been working on the staffing process for next year. I also want to point out for board members that 2 resignations were added since the board docs went out on Thursday. Both of the resignations are speech and language pathologists, and that is concerning. We are hearing that across the whole region, staffing for speech and language pathology is really challenging. In our situation, one person moved for family reasons, and the other person decided that she wanted to implement private practice, and that is becoming a more common theme with speech and language. So Sam and Tonya are working hard, not only on trying to staff our assisted programming, but also looking at what other programming options may be an option, depending on staffing availability. But we are recommending that the board approve the new hires and the resignations.
Were the 2 additional resignations both full-time staff?
They both were full-time, yes.
Joe, is this a service that can be covered by that blanket with Csa that we approve every year or not?
Yes and no. However, there's so much need for that. I don't believe Csa has been able to staff already for Csa schools. There is teletherapy and things like that, and we can bring a report back as we work on this. Our intent is to try to hire and staff these positions as is. However, I want to give the board a heads up that this may be a challenge.
I just have one comment. With the state of turnover and with teaching in the teaching industry, do we do consistent exit interviews with everyone?
We send out a survey, it's an exit survey that every exiting staff member gets. And so they can complete that. It has several questions on it that they can answer, and then we go back and kind of look at that feedback and analyze that. And then I do give the option, if people would like to come and talk with me, they are welcome to do an in-person exit interview if they would like.
I was wondering along the same lines, if, obviously there's sensitive personal topics in these, but if there's a way to have a report to the board about exit interviews over the last couple of years, to see if there's any trends we should be aware of. So it's not, one at a time, but see if there's anything consistent we should be looking at. I'm just kind of curious what the overall trends are, as opposed to each individual.
The board will set the calendar of board reports this summer, and I would suggest at that time, maybe we could make a recommendation to add a report to the calendar of board reports that would include that information, if that's acceptable to the board.
I think there was not maybe quite to the extent he's looking for, but you did a report for us last year that included exit reasons and things like that too, I think.
Yeah, part of that is included with my HR board report that I do. So it kind of depends if you want a summary of the exit survey that I do, or if you want the, any feedback that I get individually. It's not real common for people to come in and talk with me. It's really at their discretion. So that's not as common as people completing the exit survey.
Any other discussion?
I would just add with speech, in the hospital world I work in, it's been terrible the last 2 to 3 years as well, PT, OT, ST, but especially speech and OT. If you want to go to school for that, kids out in the audience, you'll write your ticket.
Speech psychology is quite a journey too in education. It's just not a 4-year degree. It takes a lot of math, science, and understanding a lot of that, and it's like a 7-year program, 7 or 8 year program. So it's intense, so that may be another reason too why people aren't going into it as much.
Any other discussion? Okay, so we have a motion on the table to accept the personnel consent agenda, and a second. Then can we vote?
Rachel's good. Just need you. I'll do voice.
Yes.
Okay, so the motion passes 9-0. Okay, moving on to the action agenda, item 3A, the approving the extension of the SDMA longevity incentives. Entertain a motion to approve the longevity incentives.
So
Second.
Rachel and Carl.
Just for a little additional background, this proposal, this proposal and plan was approved by the board 5 years ago, and at the time, the board approved it for a 5-year period. I do think it's been a good and well-deserved, good and well-deserved longevity incentive for our most tenured staff. This was included in the administrative recommendation for the compensation plan. However, as you know, the compensation plan got modified a little bit the night it was approved, and this was not necessarily included in the motion. So just to be sure that this is the board's intent, it is recommended to make these longevity incentives permanent.
Just to be clear, when you say permanent, it was approved originally for 5 years. We are not approving for an additional 5 years. We're approving for it to be permanent, correct?
Yes, that is the recommendation.
Any discussion?
Yes, as I look at this incentive, I'm definitely in favor of it, but it occurs to me that a specific incentive for longevity, if that's necessary, I think it might be a systemic indication that the pay grades are not automatically increasing as someone moves through their career in a way that people feel sufficient. So I think that's something to think about, is if you have to do an additional incentive, it means maybe the base pay structure could use some revision. That's not a criticism of this particular plan, as much as a comment about, how pay structures tend to operate. You start to adding things here and there, kind of wonder if the foundation should be reinforced a little bit.
Do we just jump in with comments?
Yeah, yes, as long as we're respectful, let's, if it gets out of hand, we'll ask for people to raise their hands before they speak, but as long as we're respectful, I like to be able to do that if we can.
If the intent of this is to keep people long-term, then I sort of question dividing the amount that we pay people depending on contracted or hourly. Because we're not asking people, the focus of this is not necessarily about the individual work they do, but they've dedicated 20 plus years of their life. Some of them literally, like if they're hitting 30 to 35 plus longer than I've been alive, like they've been committed to our district. And so I would like to see having just a set number for people for the number of years they spend in our district. Or at least see what that would look like.
Joe, can you maybe tell us the history of why that was a percentage instead of a dollar amount for the hourly?
Sure, and really, it has to go with, let me give you some history on this altogether. Before I came, Menomonie went to a different compensation structure, and it really was focused on the teacher compensation, and it was right after Act 10, and there were performance points, and there was all these other things. And what we found is that the people at the top of the scale, who had been here the longest, did not receive as much of an increase over the years. And there were some times when the amount of new money put on the scale did not even allow for an extra step to be generated. So some people at the top ended up really having a few years where they didn't receive hardly any new increase at all. So that was part of the intent of trying to do this. Since that time, we've been adding an annual step at the end and building in steps each year. But there was that period there where we feel that people needed to have an additional increase, and that's where this came from. Now, teachers are contract employees, so we can give them a lump sum. However, with the hourly employees, it doesn't work that way. It has to do with the fair labor laws and how we're compensating our hourly employees. So we were required to look at a percentage basis, and that's why it's different from hourly compared to salaried.
Can you give us a sense to whether it shakes out to be pretty similar, not knowing what these percentages mean in real life?
It was designed to be almost identical. Now, it does change a little bit. It depends on how many hours people work. Also, as the hourly scale has changed, that would slightly change it as well. But I still think it's pretty darn close. The intent is still there.
I guess I'd like to know how many people that are included with this. So $33,000 is going out in some way, shape, or form with different amounts to how many people in the district?
Do you know that number, Leah? I know it changes every year based on retirements and people who end up with years of service that qualify. I hesitate to guess. Leah, you don't know either?
I have to look. and see.
We could bring a report back, but what I can tell you is that people have received these longevity incentives. A number of people who may have already been at 20+ years when this started 5 years ago, they've been receiving it, and if the board does not approve the continuation of it, they will see less in their contract. So we are recommending that the board approve this.
I guess my take is that whether we call it attempt to retain or show appreciation, I mean, it's both. And if in a year from now, we want to have another or less, have an agenda item where we discuss changing this to be more or less, whatever, that's fine. But I think not doing it right now would not be helpful.
I agree, I'm really in support of keeping it, and I also think, it's really helpful to have that total of how much it costs the district, because it's not very much in terms of, a percentage of our budget, it is a meaningful thing to do for our teachers and staff that have stuck it out.
Any other discussion? Okay, Jenny, let's go.
I'm not sure what it is.
And you can do a voice vote, is it okay?
Yes.
Mr. Bo?
Yes.
Thank you. I figured I just had one, so.
Okay, so the motion passes 9-0. Moving on to the discussion items, item 4A, review of the annual school nutrition report. Ms. Klosser is here to give us is here to give us that report.
Well, as I stated in the report, this year looked a little bit closer to what we would be normal for a meal service. The kids were coming through the line and eating in the cafeteria, so that was nice to see. We pre-plated meals using disposable trays for most to start the year. And instead of our self-serve garden bars, we portioned all the fruits and fresh vegetables. So the kids still got that, but we portioned it and put it on their trays. We were able to transition to regular trays for most of the schools, but continue to use disposable silverware. And in discussing with the health department, they were supportive in hopefully being able to transition into regular trays and the self-serve garden bars and everything next year, barring anything happening to prevent that. And so we're real excited about that. Due to the supply chain issues, we were unable to use all of the USDA fund allowances that we had. And so to compensate for this, schools were issued additional funds to use for items that we were unable to purchase through USDA. So schools were really felt the impact more so than restaurants as far as items being available. And so we were having a very difficult time getting certain things. And so the extra funding was very helpful in being able to continue to purchase. We expanded our nutrition program assistant position to the assistant director, high school kitchen manager, and hired Stacy Nelson. She's a registered dietitian, and this was a great asset to our program and to the district. Next, I have listed the school nutrition programs that we participate in. And the first one is the seamless summer option, which took place instead of the National School Lunch Program and School Breakfast Program. And that was due to the fact of all the waivers that were in place and the ability to offer free meals, breakfast and lunch to all kids this year. And so we were really, really happy to be able to do that for this school year. We added an after-school snack program at the middle school, and that would be funded only for this year. That was funded based on the waivers that were in place last year. So that is one program that would not be funded next year. Participation has been good. We have seen over the last 2 months a definite increase. I think that's really reflective of what families are seeing with the prices increased in the cost of living.
We continue to buy local ground beef for all of our, most of our bulk ground beef that we use in our menus. I would say at least 95%, if not a little bit more, we purchase locally. And we hope to expand on that for next school year. Vegetables from our school gardens are used in our lunch program whenever they're available. So if the schools have a garden and they're growing something, we'll find a way to serve it, either in the garden bar or mixed in with other roasted vegetables or things like that. We do cater daily lunches for Cooley Connections. I believe this is our second year of doing that. And so that too is another way to bring in revenue for our program. The financial part of our program, our school nutrition program is self-funded. That means that all of our expenses are paid for with money that we receive in sales and reimbursement. So we don't typically get any funds from the general fund to cover expenses for our program. We handle that all from within our program. And really, I believe that to do that, you need to have a good program, and you need to have good participation, and you need to serve kids good food to do that. So with that, all of the expenses that we're responsible for include all the food, all the supplies, all the labor, benefits, equipment, and repairs on equipment in our department. So really, when you think about what kids pay for a meal, and it has to cover all of that, it's a pretty good deal. This school year, we've been operating with many USDA waivers, like I mentioned before, and the waivers allowed us to have all the meals served to students at no charge to families. And the meals were reimbursed at a higher rate. So due to the increase in reimbursement, we were able to get more equipment and do some things in our program. USDA allows only 3 months of operating expenditures to be in your fund balance. And for the first time in my career, we've had an excess of that. So we did get a notice from DPI that we need to look at our expenses, or our fund balance, and have a plan in place to spend that. So with the uncertainty of food prices and everything for next year and participation in the meal programs, the excess of the fund balance could easily be depleted. The excess anyway, not the fund balance, but the excess in that. The waivers were not extended for next year, unfortunately. So as of right now, we will have to charge families for meals again. So with our fund balance, where it's at, I think we'll be able to cover some of those if the expenditures are exceeding our revenue. I think our fund balance can make up the difference in that. The paid lunch equity is something that started in 2011, and it's just a formula to be sure that we are not using the free reduced reimbursements to cover the normal paid meal. So there's a formula that we have to do. And then every December, we look at our fund balance, and if we're negative, then we need to look at raising lunch prices. So we're not, based on our fund balance in 2021, December 31st, 2021, we're not required to increase prices for 22-23. So with that, my recommendations for the meal prices are to stay what they were, in 2019, I believe is when we had those. So elementary, $2.85, middle school and high school, $2.95, and then reduced price to stay at 40 cents per meal. I really think that the families need this transition, and I think we're really, it's really good that we have that fund balance to rely on, that we can give those families that additional year. And we don't know how many kids are gonna participate next year. With families having to pay for the meals, it could affect participation. Because when you apply for free and reduced, it goes by income, not what all your expenses are. So we could see a decrease in participation, unfortunately. We're hoping that, but we could. So for this next year, I think we have enough cushion in our fund balance to cover any excess expenses without raising prices for families. And in the bottom of the report, I just have some pictures I wanted to show. A couple of the pictures are from this year, and then I do have some pictures from previous years, just because that's where we really want to get back to, is showing the meals like this, where the kids can go through the line and pick the fresh fruits and veggies, and these are actual trays from our program. And so I just wanted to show you the kids you get. Does anyone have any questions?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. I continue to be so impressed by you and your department and the quality of the meals you're putting out, the efficiency you're doing it, the budget. I mean, it blows me away. It really does.
Thank you. I have a great staff and I do credit them because if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be able to do this. Thank you.
I'm gonna echo Carl's statement. I'm looking at these pictures, and if kids and students are really eating what is on these pictures, we did not get that when I was in school. That's amazing.
Well, I love to cook and love to try new recipes, and I'm very thankful that my staff is always eager to try new recipes and try new things to the kids, to offer the kids.
For what it's worth, my son told me yesterday that the cherry tomatoes at school are much better than the ones I bring home. So I take it personally, but
I was just having a talk with my son about our school lunches and how he always had two. So I appreciate, I mean, we had to pay for two, but he always had enough too for some of those kids who burned a lot of calories and got up here at 5:30 in the morning for weightlifting and then did football afterward. They all had 2 meals, so appreciate it.
I forgot to mention too that I do want to, this next school year, offer free breakfast district-wide also. And we always reevaluate that in January, but I think it's important to, if we can say as a district that we start our day, all of our kids can start the day with something to eat, I think that speaks a lot for our district.
I have a technical question, I guess, Michelle. Has the process of obtaining free and reduced forms has gotten easier for families?
Through direct certification, yes, yes. So most of our families who qualify for free or reduced have qualified through direct cert. So we send a list of all of the kids to a database in Madison, and it's checked to see against other programs that may qualify them, so it eliminates some of that paperwork. We're really going to stress that it's important for families to fill that out this year, especially this year, to make sure that families get the benefits that they are entitled to.
do you think there's things that can happen in the schools to help make sure the families get that paperwork? I mean, I don't know if that's your department or if that's some.
Well, I can answer that. That's one of the reasons, usually Michelle's report is in the summer, but we talked about it and we felt it was important to get it out now that it's not looking like we'll be able to have free meals next year except for breakfast. So we want parents to be aware of that so they can plan ahead. But also, that's one of the biggest things is that we will be letting people know there is the direct cert program for qualifying, but people can also apply themselves by filling out the form for either free or reduced lunches, meals. So that's one of the reasons why we asked Michelle to do the report here in April, so that this spring we plan to send notice out to families. But this is kind of kicking off that notice.
And the applications for next year won't be available until after July 1st. But just to let parents know that that is coming.
I assume we're going to do some sort of a marketing campaign to
Yes.
make sure that happens.
Yes.
Mark, did you have
I'm gonna hold off.
All right.
So board members, we will be bringing back Michelle's recommendation on the meal prices, and you'll see those here this spring.
Any other questions, comments?
I have a somewhat tangential question. I just noticed that in this report, which is fantastic and amazing, as people have said, and really encouraging, is actually not, it's in the private board docs, but not the public side of board docs. I was wondering if there's a reason for that, or if there's a way, because I think this is sort of a report that I think people would be really interested to know how great things are going in terms of our food programs.
If board members would like us to put all reports into the public part of board docs, we can. In past years, the board, again, this is prior to my time here, preferred to have reports in the background section so that board members could view and discuss them before they went public, and then they could be moved after the board meeting. It's really at the board's discretion.
Are they moved after the meeting? Then,
Sometimes upon request, it depends on what kind of report it is.
So are they only moved upon request by the board?
Not by the board. Typically, if someone requests them, then we move them.
Okay.
Some things get moved. I guess I'm not sure what our current practice is. We would have to review that.
does it make sense for our practice to become, regardless of what it is, to become, after every report, the board gives consent to move the report to the public side?
Sure.
Any thoughts on that question?
Does that require a motion?
I think that's a great idea, actually, because you know, there are certainly sensitive things which may, have kind of internal things that shouldn't be kind of posted publicly, but a lot of these reports are essential for people to kind of be aware of what's going on, and they're almost all highly encouraging.
Right.
My belief is that anything that can be, other than closed session stuff, should be out there for the public to see. I think it helps with transparency.
I completely agree, except I think it makes sense to do it after the board sees it and discuss it in case there's a suggested edit or something like that. But then, yes, I completely agree, it should be out there. Just my opinion. Okay, any other questions, comments?
I would just hope that as long as somebody is paying attention and is actually moving it over.
Yeah, that's been part of the challenge. We have had some turnover, as you know, and everyone's done a great job with the transition, but we've had quite a bit of transition. That's why I said I want to review our practices. That hasn't been one of the highest priorities at this point, but I understand that it is important. So we certainly can prioritize that moving forward.
And I think it will help to remind you all if we make that clear after each report that we want it moved over to the public side.
Yeah, and Rachel asked if a motion was necessary. I don't think it's necessary, but if you want to formalize it, you certainly could.
Okay, thank you very much, and on behalf of the board, please thank your staff as well. You guys do a great job, thank you. Okay, moving on, 4B, review the professional development needs assessment survey report.
So Brian is not able to be here tonight, but he did submit in the board's background the results of the professional development needs assessment survey. And Brian and his team survey the staff every third year, and they survey the staff to identify the major areas of professional development that need to be focused on. And you can see from the report that there were a number of areas, and starting with assessment, staff identified, let me back up. There was a total of 191 staff that responded to at least one question on the survey. So for assessment, the use of our EduClimber data warehouse tool was identified, as was the development and use of formative and summative assessments. With instructional strategies, the addressing the challenging student behaviors was identified. For social and emotional learning, SEL mental wellness, it was meeting the needs of struggling learners, student de-escalation strategies, and staff mental wellness. For instructional framework, it was the win time, the what I need time, universal design for learning and inclusionary practices, leveraging professional learning communities or PLCs, and mindfulness in the classroom. Content area standards was also identified in terms of supporting staff with the implementation and increased familiarity with the use of content area standards as part of the 3-phase rollout of the Wisconsin academic standards. And then additional areas to be prioritized for PD over the next 3 years would include specialized professional development activities by content area and departments related to standards assessment and reporting, vertical collaboration time by departments centered around assessment and data analysis, training on the role of paraeducators in relation to assessment, vertical alignment, and intervention strategies in filling learning gaps. So that's kind of the high-level summary of the report. And certainly Brian could answer questions in the future if there are more questions. But is there anything that you have for me tonight?
Joe, do you recall how many staff members took the same survey 3 years ago?
I do not, sorry.
Any?
We usually get pretty good participation. I would say it's probably similar, but I don't know that number.
The thing that struck me looking at the survey results was that, especially on that second page, with the instructional strategies and social emotional development and so on, to me, the thing that keeps getting the highest marks are meeting the needs of struggling students, addressing challenging behavior, and the win time as needing more time and more support in working one-on-one with students who are either in need or have, difficult behavior patterns. So I think, to me, that's one of the key messages. That's clearly the longest bar on most of these bar charts, so something to think about.
Yeah, that's always a real challenge, and I think the pandemic has emphasized it even more, Abe. I will say that, having been a classroom teacher myself, differentiation is hard. It requires more planning, it requires more work. And we certainly want to serve our students where our students are at. And it gets really tricky to provide equitable experiences within one classroom. We do have situations where students are pulled out of the classroom for some specialized services, but it is a challenge. Thankfully, we have relatively low class sizes here in Menomonie, which I think makes it more doable than some other places. However, it's no surprise to me that a classroom teacher would identify that as a major issue.
Will we have an opportunity to hear from Brian about how these survey results inform the work going into the next year?
Sure, we can have him share that information. I'll make a note of it, Rachel. What I can tell you is that in the past, these survey results have helped in terms of what kind of speakers we bring in, what kind of schedule is built for the professional development days, what kind of opportunities there are. That would be kind of some general concepts, but he could go into more of the detail.
I realize it's not fair to ask you to speak for him.
That's okay.
Any other discussion? Okay, hearing none, let's move on to item 4C. Review of the 2021-2022 budget revisions. Leah, I assume this one's yours.
So each spring, we bring budget revisions to the board, so this is a typical report for this time of year. Also, as we near the end of the school year, we see an increase in budget revision requests from the various school sites and departments. We also get our funding revenue accounts, those amounts start to come in and we get a better idea of what we're going to receive. So we make those adjustments, and the accounts where you see site budget revisions, those are primarily coming from the various school sites that maybe they want to take some money from their supply account and put it in equipment or software, or they realize a piece of equipment broke down, so now they need to replace that. So that primarily is what's in those types of revisions. The other ones I've listed out there, and then you can see as you go down the list, there's quite a few grant revisions. As we go through the year, there comes a need to make revisions accordingly. Expenses change, things are unforeseen, and so there's a lot of grant revisions and such towards the end of the year as well. Any questions?
So this is just me learning. So the site budget revisions are not necessarily an increase or decrease in expenses, but are a lateral move of expenses from one sort of line item to another, or could be either?
Mainly just lateral, move from this account to that account. But some, if a piece of equipment breaks down or there's something unforeseen, it could be an increase in their budget.
Any other discussion, questions? Okay, so we'll bring that back to the first meeting in May for approval. Moving on to 4D, review strategic planning goals and major activities for 2021-2022.
So doesn't it seem like just yesterday, it was July and the board was approving the work plan for this year. The time just flew by, and I'm so thankful that the board prioritized the work plan. At that time, we were just starting to hear about the potential of a new variant of COVID with the Delta strain, and at that time, people were still feeling pretty good about things, but we knew that there was the potential to have some interruption to our normal operations. We were all hopeful, but we knew that the potential was there. What we didn't, at least what I didn't anticipate, was that we would end up going through two peaks, two spikes of the pandemic this year. So it really was difficult to stay on track with the work plan, but I am very, very pleased with the work that our administrative team and our teachers and staff have done to continue moving forward on the strategic plan. So the plan that the board approved on July 12th, there were items that were bolded in the plan. Those were the items that the board identified at that time that said, if at all possible, let's prioritize these items. And then if we do have capacity issues or interruptions, the other items, they're all important, but we want to prioritize the ones in bold. So as you can see in each of the pillars of our strategic plan, we were able to make very good progress on each pillar. All of the bold items are either completed or on track for completion. And we've even been able to get beyond the bold items into the other items that were not prioritized in July. So as you can go through, again, you can see that a number of these items are already done. We are still working on a few things to try to wrap up, and there will be another report to the board before the end of the year on June 30th. However, I think we're in a really good position. I do want to point out that some things are out of our control. For instance, in Pillar 3, our talented workforce, one of our prioritized items was to analyze DPI's annual inequitable distribution of teachers report to identify any areas of need and report to the board back before June 30th. We have been waiting for that report. That report was not issued last year, and it's appearing that the report may not be issued this year as well. So that would be about the only bolded item that I think may or may not be done. It's listed as on track for completion because we're ready to review it. However, we just found out actually today that that one it's not likely that we're going to get that report. Otherwise, things are looking really good. I think, again, we've made more progress than what was prioritized. But I think this is also a good opportunity for the board and for new board members particularly to kind of understand how our work plan was put together, because it won't be long and we'll be asking for your input on developing a work plan for the 2022-2023 school year. And the board can determine at that time where we're at. We will have our family survey completed. You'll note that was one of the items on this work plan. That survey actually went live today, and there's a reporting window over the next week or two, and then we'll receive reports back, and that may help inform the work plan for next school year as well. Does anybody have any questions or comments on this update?
I agree that it was a good idea to prioritize that plan, so we weren't trying to argue all over what should be kept, what shouldn't, when we were in the midst of stuff. No progress with the career pathways website piece. That's kind of still on hold, or probably be on the next work plan, or
I'm just finding it quick.
yeah, it's
Carl.
pillar 1. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Bullet.
I was down to the bottom. Yeah, right now the capacity on the website update for academic career pathways is not there. We did have our PD day last Monday, and our focus on that part of the website was actually just getting it updated. There's a lot of parts of the website that got let go during the pandemic, and our clerical staff had a meeting here. So there's a lot of updates there, but in terms of the academic career pathway part of it, we do not have that website developed.
Just so that so we have the pathways delineated, they're just not on the web, is that correct?
They are delineated
Okay.
somewhat, but I think before we would put them out there, there's the more work that would need to be done.
But it's not sitting at nothing, so.
Correct.
Right, okay, good.
Any other questions? Comments? So our first meeting in July, we will look at the work plan for the coming year and do a similar exercise. Correct? That's the plan?
I would hope to have it approved the first meeting in July, so I think the board could anticipate seeing an initial draft in June.
Okay.
But certainly board member input is very important for that. So I would say as soon as now, if board members have items for the work plan or updates to the strategic plan, it's not too early to start communicating those. But I think the real work on this will be done in June and July.
So, Charlie, I have a question. So from the perspective of the operations of the board, if the board does want to discuss updates, revisions, or suggestion, adaptations to that plan, how would we work things like that into the agenda and on what timeline? Does that question make sense? Because you're just saying like the board could decide to, make proposals to the work plan and questions like that. So what would be the time we want to kind of discuss this?
Go ahead.
Like I said, Abe, if you have some suggestions, you can start forwarding those to me now. And what we'll do is, we'll review the strategic plan, which, you have the link to all that information. And we will start putting together a proposal for a work plan, and we'll bring that forward to you in June. And then the board will discuss it, anybody can have more ideas at that point, and then eventually, hopefully, it'll be approved in July.
Also remember, any agenda item that you want to put on the normal agenda, if you will, Wednesday noon prior to the board meeting, send it to Joe, and then we can get that on the agenda for the following meeting. Great.
Do new board members know that there's a form that needs to be filled out to put something on the agenda?
I think we covered most of that in the orientation, maybe not that specific form, but it is listed in the board policies. It's Exhibit 2, 171.2, Agenda Request Template.
In the one.
Yeah, 171.2.
Okay,
Would it be reasonable to put a link to that somewhere easier to find? I could save it.
any other questions, discussion on that item? Strategic plan? None? Okay, 4E, items related to next meeting dates, board meetings, and reports. So we have our regular meeting on May 9th, our special meeting on May 23rd, graduation on May 29th, and then that June retreat, as of now anyway, on June 6th. Hopefully we can keep that date. And then the 13th and the 27th. Any questions, thoughts? Yes?
First of all, the times will all be updated to 5:45. Secondly, at the last meeting, there was a question about whether or not there were 2 meetings in May. And the fourth Monday does not fall on Memorial Day. So yes, there is 2 meetings in May. I just want to make sure everyone understands that there is going to be the meeting on the 23rd. And then in terms of the retreat, I had a question on there. Retreats can be held in a lot of different ways. It can be held in more of a board setting. It can be held off-site. Oftentimes with the retreat, we like to make it a little more convivial and have a dinner. Do board members have any preference how we organize that retreat? I think it'd be nice to have a dinner. People could get there. It doesn't start till 6, and we could have dinner before that. And I see a lot of.
I think dinner is an excellent idea.
Anybody opposed? Okay, so we'll confirm the date. Hopefully that'll work, and then we'll set up a kind of an evening out of it.
And you're going to try to go off-site?
Yeah.
All right, any other questions, discussion on board on future meeting date?
If we do have to move it, do you have a thought about what time scale? We just move it to a different day in the same week, or move it to a different week, or what do you think?
If we have to move it, I'll have to put a communication out to the board and do a calendar check, because,
And I think getting John Ashley's calendar
yeah.
to match with ours is probably gonna be the most difficult piece. Okay. Hearing no other discussion, I would take a motion to adjourn.
So move.
A second.
Carl and Tanya,
If the newly elected board officers could stay back, we need to get some signatures. And then Abe, don't forget, you need to swear in Jenny as your deputy clerk.
okay, we stand adjourned. Have a good evening, everybody.